All right, gonna just let everyone get in here real quick.
Nate, can you tell what shirt I'm wearing by just the small part of it you can see on the screen? I didn't wear it deliberately because of today's events.
Well, let me mute. Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't look at it until just now. I was trying to actually get us live here.
Doing the work that's necessary. What a good soldier.
All right, here we go. Welcome on to a Sunday night edition of Dunked On live on YouTube, Dunked On Prime. A reminder that for those of you who have liked and subscribed and commented, we will pick 2 commenters to get a free year of Dunked On Prime at the end of the show. So let's get rolling here, Danny. Where are we starting?
We need to start in Philadelphia, where to me the most compelling game of the day, though there are some competitors to that, came in Knicks-Sixers, and it was a fascinating, weird game for a number of different reasons, the ebbs and flows of it, and one that now the New York Knicks walk away with a 3-1 series lead, coming away victorious 97-92.
Yeah, and so many strategic battlegrounds in this game that really stuck out. And I guess we can begin with Jalen Brunson and how they are dealing with the pick and rolls. Brunson appeared to find something in game 3, and that really continued to be the case. The Sixers were not able to bring as much help as they did in games 1 and 2, and that prevented Josh Hart and company from getting going. I thought the Knicks actually maybe could have run a little bit more for DiVincenzo when he was hot in the first. But ultimately, really an offensive loss for the Sixers. Like, they held the Knicks to 97 points. Like, even with Brunson going for 47, it's hard to argue that their strategy of kind of letting Brunson cook and not letting anyone else beat you was the wrong strategy. It's just that they couldn't score themselves. That was kind of the bigger issue, but maybe we should discuss more of what took place with Brunson.
I'd like to start there. And the early part of the game, I brought this up a lot. We broadcast on playback, where the quality of shots that Jalen Brunson was getting was much easier. He was, like more like batting practice jumpers for him in that first quarter. And Brunson, it was 3 of 4 from mid range, and all of those were wide open. He took 7 3-pointers just in the first quarter. Only actually, I believe he made one of those 7, but they were mostly clean looks. And part of that was taking advantage of the drop that Joel Embiid was in. Part of it was taking advantage of the lack of additional pressure that they were bringing, and the coverages changed over the course of the game. But that allowed Brunson to partially to get into the rhythm. But one of the more basic points on it is it allowed the Knicks' best player to take shots he was comfortable taking, as opposed to forcing less capable Knicks to take similar shots.
So you would have been more aggressive in bringing help then?
Yes, I agree with your general thesis that it isn't the reason that Toronto, or not Toronto, that the Sixers lost this game, but it was a contributing factor.
Yeah, you could say if your offense isn't working, then the solution is that you have to defend even better than you're already defending, right? I don't believe in necessarily leaving money on the table there. And Brunson was 18 of 34, and the mid-range shooting and upper paint shooting was quite ridiculous. Brunson took 12 shots from mid-range, another 10 upper paint. So that's 22 total, and went 13 to 22 on such shots. That is just an amazing number of shots for anyone to be taking from as twos away from the rim, and
Yeah.
incredible efficiency there as
Oh,
well.
one apology. I was reading the wrong line. Brunson was 1 for 3 on threes. The Knicks were 1 for 7 in the first quarter. But I agree with you. And the shots that he was taking, yeah, I mean they were within the realm of like stuff that he is comfortable with. And I thought generally speaking, the contests were a little bit worse. And Jalen Brunson's one hell of a basketball player. The first 2 games he played in this series were below his usual standard, partially forced by the greatness of Philadelphia's talent and their scheme and everything else. But I thought that the opportunities were a little bit more robust for Brunson than they could have been, and we saw a little bit of the Hartenstein to the dotted line. It was a little bit different in this game, in part because of where Joel Embiid's coverage was, and in part because Isaiah Hartenstein, which ended up becoming maybe the next tactical battleground we should go to. Basically, he picked up. It was a wild turn of events, completely clean. And
Yeah.
go ahead,
But before we do that, let me
some more Brunson.
just talk a little more on Brunson. Yeah. So
Sure.
I mean, I would like to maybe consider going to the box one. I think there's just a feeling that the Knicks had figured that out, that you could swing the ball to the weak side for threes there. I'm not so sure on that, honestly. The one thing I might consider is less switching on small actions, where the
Yeah,
Knicks
like
could
low
just
resistance switching.
yeah, anytime they wanted to, they were just point switching. The Knicks could get whoever they wanted on Brunson, and that makes it a lot easier for Brunson. Kelly Oubre really has done a pretty good job on when Brunson hasn't been able to draw the foul on him when he gets in front of him. Oubre, with that 7'2" wingspan, has really kind of bothered him with those rear view contests. And so I think they should try to get over screens. And okay, because the thing is, you still have Joel behind everything, right? Like if they want to set a screen for Brunson without Joel being involved, I don't know if you blitz Brunson on those actions. You certainly are going to hedge a lot. Now, what they don't want to do, and Brunson is good at this, is right. So you hedge, then the guy who's guarding Brunson is going to go usually under 2 and try to meet him on the other side. But then you're not attached to him, and Brunson, once he has space, he can kind of get into his stop and start game and beat you there. But it still would be your main defender on him. So that's one thing. Or you might just, if they want to do something like that, just blitz Brunson right there and force the Knicks to beat you 4-on-3. But they're still never going to get a layup with Joel underneath. And before we move on to the stuff with Achua and Hartenstein, they did go at Joel a little bit more. They're 12 of 25 at the rim, but that opened up some offensive rebounding. I think they showed appropriate fear of Joel in this game rather than just utterly terrified fear. So DiVincenzo and Anunoby, who they still run every ATO for, and he had some big shots in this game. Like I thought they went at Joel enough. Like you can't just take less than 20 shots in the restricted area because he's there, and then they're a great offensive rebounding team too. So I think that was it was better that some of those support guys were willing to challenge him at least a little bit.
It was, and that also it makes Embiid work a little bit. It creates those opportunities on the offensive glass, most of which the offensive rebounds came late. The Knicks did better there. We'll discuss that at a different juncture. And yeah, that's a natural transition into Isaiah Hartenstein. And so to paint the fuller picture, Hartenstein without Mitchell Robinson available due to this ankle issue, it's Hartenstein and Precious Chua that are the centers that are available. Not Jericho Sims or somebody else unless they're going there. First half, they run it very close to a traditional like starter backup. So Hartenstein plays 17 and a half minutes. Precious Chua plays 6.5 minutes. And then Hartenstein plays the first 10:35 of the third quarter. And during that 10:35, after being completely foulless in the first half, and I didn't even see any like that he really got away with during that, Hartenstein commits 5 fouls in that 10 and a half minutes. Embiid gets to the free throw line 8 times, which is an important part of their offensive success. They had a little some shakiness actually that got masked in the third quarter by Embiid getting to the line a bunch. And Hartenstein picks up his 5th foul. Tom Thibodeau goes to Precious Chua, though saying Precious Chua on Embiid is misstating things because a lot of the time the matchup was actually OG and Anunoby, and I thought that totally messed with what the Sixers wanted to do.
Well, and I liked also going to it later in the game.
Sure.
And Anunoby picked up a foul right at the beginning of that matchup on a pump fake. But other than that, did a pretty good job of keeping Joel off the line. I thought Joel got a few kind of weak calls on his way to 8 free throw attempts in the fourth quarter. But that was kind of all the Sixers would have was kind of those bullshit foul drawing attempts. But I like going to it late because Joel was tired. And the big strategy was that they were going to just make it hard for him to catch the ball, get into his grill. Joel actually probably had his most successful game facing up and driving, in large part because Hartenstein couldn't keep his hands off him in that third quarter and kept giving up fouls. Quick aside, by the way, they should be forcing Embiid right because he wants to push off that healthy right leg and go left, and then he also can get into his jumper more easily going left. Going right, it's just harder to shoot a jump shot going right if you're a right-handed player for anybody, and particularly when he also is going to push off there. But yeah, it seemed to work out pretty well because then they also had Achua on the back line to clean up some of the other issues. If they were going to have Joel higher out on the floor, some guys driving Achua I thought was really important as a rim protector in that fourth quarter. And it really seemed like Philly in the end just could not make a field goal in the fourth quarter. They end up going. It's actually right, 7 of 14. Is this the fourth quarter? No, this is the third quarter. That's what I thought.
Mhm.
Okay, fourth quarter. Yeah, and Joel was 7 of 8 free throws in the third quarter. Excuse
Third
me on
quarter,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, and so in the fourth quarter, Embiid was 1 of 2 from the foul line, 0 of 5 from the field, and 2 of those were 3 pointers. And Philly goes 6 out of 24. So it really worked exceedingly well. Part of it too is that they just couldn't hit a three in the fourth. Like they had a couple open corner threes. Campaign actually had the only 3 pointer in transition for Philly in the fourth quarter. So
Yeah, and that was an aggressive pull, by the way, with Payne. It was a 1-on-3, and he just took it, but he made it. Maxey had taken a similar shot earlier. And another part of that matchup that I really liked for the Knicks was that you brought up how OG Anunoby was making Embiid work. He had to work for a position, was that it also capitalized on one of the weaknesses of this 76ers team, particularly as present on the floor at the time, which is a story I want to talk about, which was entry passing. And so Embiid, they're doing a lot of fronting, and you could drive the front. Maxey did that a little bit, but not very much actually. But
yeah, no, he should have
throwing
done it way more. There were
way
some
more.
very obvious plays where he should have done that.
But there are basically only two members of the Sixers that I think are consistently good at entry passing. One of them is Kyle Lowry. He played, he did a fine job. And the other one is Nicolas Batum, who was conspicuously absent for a lot of the fourth quarter. He did play 4 minutes overall, but if that's the scheme that the team is using, you should play a guy who actually knows how to make that pass and is very good at it. And Batum, as a taller human being than Kyle Lowry, has a better passing angle for it. And so there were a series of possessions where like Embiid is kind of working for a position. He's also tired as hell, which I really want to get into. And so not only like is he working, he's often working for nothing. And that can be difficult for Embiid, especially when they're not scoring. Philly only had 16 points in the fourth quarter. And so it was the combination. And as I've complained about incessantly in this series, Tobias Harris isn't doing enough to justify him being on the floor instead of Batum. And it's even more egregious when there is a specific thing that Batum does better than Harris, and you need it at that exact moment, and you just never dial him up.
Yeah, just the overall organization decision making, particularly with the fatigue level from Embiid and Maxey, both of whom played the entire second half, was pretty rough. And so Embiid's getting fronted, and Maxey doesn't drive the front, and they don't get off the ball and try to find a different passing. I thought Nurse also on the plays that they're trying to run for Embiid, which like once they could actually get the ball into Embiid, it was good offense, right? Because the Knicks were just going to double team immediately, but they just couldn't get organized enough to actually get on the ball. McBride was really good against Maxey. That was another great decision by Tibbs going with McBride down the end. We can talk a little more about his game in a second, but so I would have tried to get Lowry or maybe Batum to see if they could be the ones entering the ball. I mean, and God forbid Joel Embiid would ever like, duck in on a guy who's like that small, or like, could actually like beat him down the floor for post position, or that they could actually like get the ball in a position where if they're fronting him, they could lob it over the top to a 7-2 guy who has great hands. Like it just Joel Embiid typically makes the game harder for himself. And it doesn't matter because he just is that skilled and that big. But if he doesn't have the stamina or the will to just like actually use his body on the floor, and that the only time he really does that is, on the offensive end, is when he's like, has the ball in his hands and he just doesn't get physical at any other time. Like, he's leaving money on the table if he's not in good enough shape to do that, because he should be getting, 10 easy points a game just by ducking in, getting fouls on guys off the ball, like holding him as he flashes middle, stuff like that. Like, he just doesn't ever get those kind of calls. And he makes up for it by, doing this like go through the arm bullshit, which worked pretty well in the third quarter. But it's also, that's not a strategy. The opponent bailing you out with mistakes isn't a strategy that you want to rely on. Now, I will put it on Nurse as well that they probably should have found a point to rest Embiid. There wasn't a convenient one because they were just like, the game was really close. Like, the Knicks were kind of up by 3 points or something. I think you just have to have the discipline to take him out at least a little bit, maybe even just for his own psychology,
Yeah, and
if nothing else. But
and the Paul Reed minutes going as poorly as they did in the first half is it was probably
yeah,
some of the motivation, but it's we spend we and I mean we as basketball media spend a lot of time talking about on off, and they've been particularly pronounced for Embiid and Jokic at times. When you overplay a player, you're not getting the off minutes, but you're making the on minutes worse. And that can be a real challenge. And Embiid looked completely gassed. He looked gassed at the end of the
yeah, it
third.
was kind of the worst of both worlds in the end.
Exactly. And so he was gassed at the end of the third. And so New York going to a strategy, even if necessity was the mother of invention, that made him work harder for that fourth quarter, then that pushed things. And another way that that really hurt the Sixers, so beyond Embiid going 0 for 5 from the field in that fourth quarter, was that in individually credited, so this does not include team rebounds, the Philadelphia 76ers grabbed 4 defensive rebounds in the fourth quarter. The New York Knickerbockers grabbed 7 offensive rebounds. And those second chance points made a massive difference for the Knicks. Like, it's not like their offense was great in the fourth quarter. They were
No.
6 of 21 from the field. They were 1 of 8 from 3, including missing some wide open ones. But they got enough lifelines to stay around. Josh Hart and company, Precious Achiuwa deserves a lot of credit too. We had a number of big offensive rebounds in the fourth to survive.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like the Knicks were getting these amazing shots that had the defense completely out of position, and then like a center just came in and dunked a tip dunk. This was, guys were in position again, and they just got beat to the ball. And I thought the difference in Embiid in particular is defensive rebounding in the first half as opposed to the second. I thought in the first half he had maybe his best defensive rebounding stretch, really boxing out, going after the ball, and he just could not do that in the second half. The Sixers also, probably not enough has been made of them missing DeAnthony Melton. They tried to bring him back in this game, and he missed a couple of threes, didn't look very comfortable with that back. The second time they brought him in, he gave up an immediate baseline out of bounds cut for a layup, although there should be help there for him on that as well. I do like going after the guy who just came in on a little cut like that. But Melton is an amazing rebounder for a guard, and he would be helping them so much if he were right and actually in the starting lineup. I mean, you're just asking too much for Kyle Lowry at his age to be like a great rebounder. And Maxey actually had 6 defensive rebounds in this game. I thought he fought pretty hard, but Harris again is not a great rebounder. Oubre, he's always going to be away from the basket, but he also just doesn't have the rebounding instinct. So if Joel is not going to be actually going after these rebounds and getting them, then it's just, guys like Hart, who flew in and was fantastic. He had 5 offensive rebounds, and Anunoby had a couple as well. Achua was excellent in that fourth quarter. Like, all those guys just ate them up on the glass. And that also is just like, playing defense is also like more fatiguing than playing offense for most guys. So being stuck on the defensive end for longer is just even more tiring.
It is. And briefly on on OG Anunoby, apologies. Anunoby, the defensive element, of course, was massive in the end of the third and the fourth quarter. But he also had a couple of points where he really had to steady the Knicks offensively when Brunson had his rest in the first half in particular. And it's not necessarily beautiful basketball. He had a couple of mid-rangers where I thought that the Sixers backed off too much and getting things around the basket on putbacks and everything else. And so Anunoby, 16 points on 16 shooting possessions, that plus the rebounding and the defense, that's more than enough for the Knicks.
Well, and the other thing too is you would think, I mean, Brunson goes 44 minutes, so does Embiid, but the Knicks stay afloat, and I think they actually even won the non-Brunson minutes with Maxey and Embiid on the floor, uh, briefly in the second half, and I think they won them also in the first half, if memory serves, but they didn't get completely destroyed there necessarily. They're -5. I guess it's about the same actually, but throughout the series, they've been able to find enough, uh, because and you would think like they only have one guy who could dribble, like he should be more important to the offense of the Knicks than Embiid is to the Sixers because the Sixers still have Maxey and they have even Tobias Harris is supposed to be a more accomplished guy than any of these Knick guys as a scorer supposed to be. But like they run a baseline out of bounds play for McBride, who's the inbounder, to come off a screen on the move in the left corner to drain a three. Like, who is this guy? Like anyone who saw the scouting report on him coming into the draft would be like, they ran a play for this dude and he was 3 of 5 from 3. He made 3 of the 7 Knick three-pointers in this game. Like that's amazing.
It is. I was actually, because I was flying back from the wedding. Charles Barkley was praising Lou Dort for something similar, which is basically like how he's changed the scouting report. Miles McBride deserves that credit as well, and it's totally changed his playability in a series like this. Because if McBride was more limited offensively, his impact on Maxey defensively would be muted because they wouldn't be able to play him and maintain their offensive structure. So sometimes you need to get better at your weaknesses in order to make your strengths relevant.
What else we got here?
Let's see.
I mean, the Knicks rim protection was awesome. I mean, they had
Mhm.
11 blocked shots. Achua had 4. And I mean, quite honestly, like I know people were Mitchell Robinson tried to warm up, could not go, particularly if he was going to be hobbled. Mitchell Robinson was massive in winning them game 1 on the offensive glass, and maybe he would have changed this game in a lot of different ways, both offensively and defensively. But I mean, it's hard to imagine that he could have been better than Achua was in this game.
I think that's completely fair, and hopefully Robinson gets healthy enough that that becomes a decision for Tibbs to make either in this series or in the future. We don't know that moving forward. Something else that we haven't mentioned, we've talked about Jalen Brunson's game, was that 44 minutes, he also had, he walked off the court and went to the locker room at the end of the
That's
third
right. Yeah.
with a knee issue. I haven't seen anything specific on that at this
Yeah,
juncture.
I couldn't tell what happened. Maybe this was I think it was his right knee as well, where he had that nerve issue. I'm gonna look that up right now, but maybe this was kind of like a recurrence of that.
Potentially. And so Brunson, he came back in the game and he looked, a little bit below his usual standard, but was still relatively close. And they needed every ounce of him in the rest of the game. And Brunson's overall fourth quarter, 9 points, 3 of 8 from the field, 3 of 4 from the line, including some foul drawing, which he did. And Kyle Lowry also had a preposterous foul drawing game, including one on Brunson, which was a
I loved that play. Everyone was like, "Oh, fucking Kyle Lowry." I'm like, "No, that was amazing!" Like taking advantage of a guy who flops. Like every player should do that. If a guy flops, just like run over him, and the guy's not in legal guarding position, and they'll call a foul on
Yeah,
that guy.
it should not have been a shooting foul because Lowry looked at Brunson on the ground, ran into him, and then took a shot. Like that's not
Yeah,
a shooting
yeah.
foul, but it is a foul, and I believe the Sixers were in the bonus at the time, so that's a margin of 1 point if I have that correct. And Lowry had a couple of other crazy grifts, including partially getting an away from the play foul late in the game to potentially give the Sixers another lifeline when he was setting a screen and just he kind of knew if Embiid's man went into him, he's just going to fall straight over. And so foul occurred before the ball was inbounded. And that reminds me of, not going to dwell on this, but I think Nick Nurse is a very good coach. I also am noting these other things and noting that it took the Sixers until basically the game was out of reach to attempt a three-pointer when they were down 2 possessions.
Yeah, and also if Embiid had not missed one of his 2 free throws late, then and obviously Hart missed a couple too to leave the door open, but they could have actually had a chance to tie after the away from the play foul. Instead, they were down 4 still. But yeah, I mean the number of times that they didn't go for a 3 down 2 possessions. I mean, basically, particularly if you're down 5 or more, particularly in the last minute of the game, you should be going for a three every single time, unless maybe like you have a guy wide open under the basket that you can just throw it to for a layup. And they just repeatedly kept going for the two. And then there was Embiid popping open on the baseline out of bounds. They're up. This is after the free throw, right? The away from the play foul they cut it to 4. They had and they ran the same play again. Anunoby didn't want to commit another foul, obviously, so they got Embiid wide open, but he goes to 2-point range rather than 3. Like, he could have been wide open for a 3. And then he was like, oh, wait, getting a 3 actually would be pretty important here. So he decides to eschew the 2-pointer, drive, and try to just, like, go into the body of someone who is attempting to jump out of his way.
That was
missed
Achua.
the layup, and that was and the game was over. Like, it was just like, if a 3 is so important, shoot a 3.
And it was so funny because it was, in many ways, it was the reverse Ben Simmons of a player turning down an open layup, but in this case it was to get fouled, which he ended up not being, as opposed to Simmons, who of course did it to avoid getting fouled. And it was an encapsulation to an extent of the game. And like, yeah, a couple of weird late game things for the Sixers. And I mean, for the Knicks, I mean, yes, they had 97 points. They had a 109 they had a 109 offensive rating, 100. So point per possession in transition. They both teams left some stuff on the table there. So when it all comes down to is, this has been an extremely close series. It's been an extremely interesting series. And at this point, it is possible, but it is exceedingly unlikely, even if you believe that the Philadelphia 76ers are the better team in this series. I mean, one way to do this is just the basic math. If you give them a 60% chance of winning every game, that's especially because 2 of those games are at Madison Square Garden. If a team was a 60% favorite in 3 games, they would have a 21.6% chance of winning the series at this point.
Well, more importantly, only 2 teams have ever come back from down 3-1 without home court. 2016 Cavs and the 95 Rockets are the only 2 teams to ever do that. So if the home team is ostensibly the better team when they go down 3-1 regardless, and then also they have 2 of the remaining 3 at home. Like, that's actually possible to do it when you're down 3-1 as the road team. But it's just completely impossible to do it. Honestly, even if Brunson were to get injured and like not be able to play in any of the remaining games, like, the Knicks would still be the favorites. So, yeah, a couple comments here. Deuce has more than replaced Quickly. Yeah, is there an argument, Danny, that Deuce has actually been like better for them than having Quickly would have?
If Brunson's going to play 44 minutes a game, yes. Because there are some limitations that get created, especially Bojan Bogdanovic in this game. Actually, he was in briefly, is dealing with ligament damage, it sounds like, to his left wrist, but then it was a very weird possession where the ball gets knocked loose and Nicolas Batum dives. And at first I was more critical of Batum, but when we saw it again, Bogdanovic put his left leg kind of in Batum's path. And so, it's unfortunate for Bogdanovic. He suffered, I believe they called it a left ankle issue.
Or a foot contusion, maybe.
Contusion.
But it's like he basically like fell on the back of his foot and jammed it into the ground. So that's, I'm not sure what, maybe he had like his toes pointed, and so all of that weight coming down on the back of his foot, smashing his toes into the ground. That's the best I can come up with there. But it's, yeah, especially with the wrist thing already, it seems like he wasn't able to return. Maybe that's something that he'll be able to play on in the next game. Yeah. But he was not a huge guy for them anyway. And honestly, I would consider maybe going with a little Achua at the 4 if they do, or they'll just play on Anunoby 48 minutes just like they do Hart.
Sure. Yeah, and a good point that we didn't mention from Luke, Oubre's fouls on shooters in the fourth quarter were also brutal. They had 2 3-shot fouls. Yep. And when we talked about both teams were struggling offensively, those were an absolute killer.
So, anything else we got to hit on here? I mean, I guess, so the Knicks changed up a little bit their assignments. They did a little bit of Hart on Maxey. The other thing that having McBride and playing him allowed was Anunoby had the main matchup on Maxey. I thought he actually did better on Maxey than he's been doing. But then if you want to put Anunoby on Embiid, then you still have McBride available to guard Maxey, because I don't think DiVincenzo necessarily could do that. Another thing that's been fascinating in this series, and also actually in the game we'll talk about next, the Clippers game, is the battle of what happens once the guy gets screened off and is on the back of the ball handler, right? Like we talked about how the Knicks have been trying so much for the rear view contest on Brunson, but now that they've stopped helping so much off of Hart, which again, I would go back to with Hart having a struggle session in this game, and try to have, another guy hanging out at the free throw line on these Brunson pick and rolls. But they were not trying to get back in front of Brunson, because the moment you try to get back in front of him, your momentum's carrying you towards the baseline, and then he'll just pull the three. Maxey has that move as well, but Brunson will just pull the jumper, usually from 2-point range. Maxey has that same move as well, going to his left, except when you try to get back in front of him, he'll actually step back then and shoot a three. So he's hit that a couple times in the series, and you could see actually that the Knicks, the guys guarding him, were like, no, I'm not going to let you do that anymore. They were all ready for that move. He tried it another couple of times, and they actually completely locked it down. So it's always so interesting to see. And this is why the playoffs are so different than the regular season, and why I love it, where it's just like, yeah, you can't just keep going to the same thing. You have to have counters and counters to your counters. Jalen Brunson probably has more counters as a dribbler than just about anyone in the league. And that's a big part of why he's been able to be so effective, and he's figured it out against this Philly team that shut him down for the first 2 games.
One other thing before we leave this game. The Philadelphia 76ers not make a field goal after the 5:04 mark of the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And that's their season.
Yeah, so I think I don't know what any other adjustments here. I mean, Melton, he just I don't know about him. Buddy Hield, they've completely given up on.
I mean, more Batum. I've been saying it forever.
Yeah, you have been, and you've certainly been correct these last couple of games. Like only 20 minutes for him is nowhere near enough to me, just because they need someone with a brain out there. Like that fourth quarter offense was just like Tyrese Maxey to me really showed some of his limitations in that fourth quarter. Again, noting he's pretty tired. Everyone is pretty tired though, so are the guys who are guarding him. But he just didn't. Yeah, sorry.
We had another play where Maxey was on the ground, but this time they gave him the timeout when he didn't really have the ball.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely that seemed like they were going to. They would have given him that timeout if the ball had been like 50 feet away from him when he tried to call it at that point. Although other people also did try to call it, but he never really had the ball. It looked like I can't remember who the defender was. Also,
it was McBride.
It might have been McBride. Yeah. Okay, let's move on here to Clippers Dallas, and very interesting that the Clippers have taken massive leads in both of the games that Kawhi Leonard did not play. Certainly, you would argue there's somewhat of a mental component to that. There's also the fact that they shot a ridiculous percentage from 3-point range, 18 of 29 in this game, while the Mavs were 11 of 33. That had at least a little something to do with it. But the Clippers, Kawhi's presence clearly kind of fucked them up, I think, mentally, and then also just with him being totally not himself, but still out there and just not really knowing how to exist as 2014 Kawhi anymore, who's certainly a player they could still use. But Kawhi did not play. He's now out indefinitely. The knee just continues to swell up when he tries to play on it, and supposedly there's nothing structurally wrong, except for the fact that he's had 2 surgeries on this knee and has quadriceps tendinopathy in there as well. And so, I mean, before we move on, I just wanted to talk a little bit about just what a shame it is that Kawhi Leonard has finished 2 seasons since 2017.
Oof. And one of those was 2019 when he was the best player on the championship team.
Yeah, it was. And then obviously the bubble was a weird time when he wasn't able to come through in the end against the Nuggets, and that whole team fell apart. I mean, that in retrospect was clearly the Clippers' best chance to win. They were my favorite coming into the playoffs that year.
And appropriately invoking that, this game was a reflection of the other part of this, which is that no one circles, then uncircles, then recircles the wagons quite like the LA Clippers, where they give up a 31-point lead, which would have been tied for the largest playoff comeback slash blown lead in NBA history. However, they
with
did that in
with their own record of overcoming it, right? Like the
yeah.
game 2 against the Warriors in 2019, the Lou Williams Montrezl Harrell game, when Ivica Zubac is the only Clipper remaining there.
He is, and that was a game you and I saw in person that was completely preposterous. And so the Clippers have this unbelievable start, and you look at the scoreline, you're like, okay, the Clippers in that first quarter they're up 39-16, and the first thing that stuck out to me was just, oh well, this is completely like I'm developing a version of it. It's sort of like Occam's razor, where it's like never attribute to narrative based reasons something that can more easily be explained by 3-point shooting variance. Where during that first quarter, the Clippers shot 8 of 11 on threes, and the Dallas Mavericks were 0 for 7. Hilariously, the Mavericks did make a three, but it was Maxi Kleba after the shot clock had expired. So I mean, you had this massive disparity where I thought that the Mavs were getting, they were working for their offense, and they weren't necessarily getting a ton. But the Clippers shot making was completely ludicrous. And Paul George had some amazing shots on his way to a strong first half. He had 26 points, a first half playoff career high. I don't know if it's a total half career high. 9 of 14 from the field, 5 of 9 from 3. And so the Clippers are hitting everything imaginable. The Mavs are 4 of 15 overall in the first half. And so watching this game, I brought this up a little bit with Magic Cavs from Saturday, where it's like, I don't think the margin between these two teams, as they've actually played the game so far, if you're kind of taking the snapshot as the attempts go up, was that different. Now, that does not mean I anticipated what happened to happen, but it seemed like there was a regressible shot making difference between these teams. Not to denigrate what the Clippers did, but then when it did regress for both the Clippers and the Mavericks, it became a pretty fun game.
Yeah, it did, and it was 31 about midway through the second. It really got out of control with Doncic on the bench, and I'm very concerned about what we've seen from him. And his three ball has just been way, way off in the series. Didn't help that he got 2 fouls right at the beginning of the game. He actually got kept in, but for Luka, this is even worse than Game 7 in 2019 for Embiid, Danny. Luka was plus 10. They lost by 5, and he played 45 minutes. They got outscored by 15 in the 3 minutes that he sat.
Yeah, it's not great. And
he
Kyrie played 45 too. Yeah, the entire second.
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and paralleling Joel Embiid to an extent, there were stretches where Luka looked completely gassed in the second half, though energized. I thought the crowd, full credit to the Mavericks crowd, they were in it pretty much the whole time, even when they were down 20 plus, and they had this stirring comeback to get it to 20. But then I did, and Luka had some big defensive possessions towards the end. He drew a charge on Paul George and on a kind of surprising play. But yeah, I'll let you go, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we got to just talk more about PG and James Harden's game.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, those guys combined for 11 of 15 from downtown. And PG, they really came out trying to get him involved, which I think, again, with Kawhi available, it just seemed like they didn't have a great game plan with the Amir Coffey getting more time, more time for Norm Powell, who was 3 of 5 from 3 himself. They knew what they were more on the offensive end. And so the big thing that they went to was more wide pin downs, mostly for PG. They also got him going for Powell, where they would start the ball all the way on the other side of the floor and have 2 guys also on the wing in the corner there. And so what that did is then they would set the wide pin down for George on the opposite side. So what that does is you can't really topside anymore, because if you do that, then he can go backdoor, but the passing angle is right there to throw it to him for a layup if they just change the angle of the screen and go backdoor. So now you have to kind of play him more straight up, and he's able to get open, coming off that wide pin down, going to his left for three, or turn the corner and then have a 2-on-1 with the whoever just set the screen, usually Zubats on that side. So just by spreading things out, bringing the ball actually further away from the action, that also then prevents whoever was guarding, say, a Harden, or if it was Westbrook throwing that pass, that prevents that guy from going all the way, coming off the passer to take that the guy coming off the screen as well. And so it
Mhm.
was really nice to just basically set up a 2-on-2 action. But the Mavs, because of the defense of 3 seconds, they really would have had to, like, you're not going to take someone away from the strong side to be on the weak side waiting for an action. So it was really very smart the way that they were able to set up PG. And then, of course, like, they were just more intentional. They just kept running it. And of course, it worked really well. So that's kind of how they got PG going. Also, they got Powell going. Usually they would bring Powell out of the left corner, usually bring PG out of the right corner on those. And Harden, being a good passer, is able to get some steam on that pass. The Mavs aren't going to, like, put a ton of pressure on him with PJ Washington or whoever was guarding him. Irving did a little bit, but they kind of had to take Irving off him because he was going crazy on offense, and they just needed his offense a little bit more. So that was really good for PG. And of course, he hit some ridiculous shots, culminating in that one in the corner off the ATO when the Mavs actually, I think, did the Mavs have the lead at that point when he hit that three? Because that was actually off a great timeout, I thought, by Ty Lue with like 2:14 remaining, I want to say, where the Mavs had just taken the lead. I think they might have even hit a three. And they were just like, oh man, the roof's finally falling in. They finally took the lead. They set up this great ATO, throwing, like, lobbing it up to PG because they were worried about him coming off the screen, like right under the basket, and he just flubbed the catch. Derrick Jones Jr. is pressuring him up. He goes all the way to the corner, and it's an insane step back behind the backboard, basically as deep in the corner as you can be, going to his right. And that was even more than the Harden floaters, which we'll get to. That was the shot of the game.
It was, and by the way, you got all the facts on that correct, the timings and everything else like that. And also notably, and this can go into the other thread that I want to paint from this part, that was the only basket that a player other than a Clipper other than James Harden made in the final 7:30 of the game.
Yeah, he hit 5 floaters in the fourth quarter. Harden.
And the story there to me is a couple of first of all, it is James Harden getting it done, getting a lot of stuff around the basket. I mean, Harden's fourth quarter, 15 points, 6 of 6 from the field, 3 of 3 from the line, 2 assists, 0 turnovers. But I also thought it was a story about some of the insufficiencies of the Dallas Mavericks. So one of them is, because of Paul George and everything else, the person who is guarding James Harden is PJ Washington. PJ Washington, contrary to the opinions of some, at least in my opinion, is not a strong individual defender, especially not on somebody as good as James Harden. So he can't defend him one-on-one. Harden is getting by Washington pretty consistently with or without a screen.
Yeah, and Harden actually kind of lit him up at the start of game one. Also, when that was the match, I think they were like, "Oh, well, he's like kind of a bigger body. Harden can't bully him." But yeah, I mean, they didn't really have any other options because they wanted Derrick Jones Jr. on PG, and so who else was going to guard him at that
Yeah,
point?
and so that's, and you have two limited defensive players in your starting five in Irving and Doncic, and then the other part of it is, even if Harden wasn't really getting to the rim that often, when you look at the way that the shots were logged in that fourth quarter, Harden, he took seven shots inside the paint, all of which were in the upper paint, none of which were in the restricted area. But the Mavs, because Daniel Gafford is hurt and also wasn't playing particularly well, and Derek Lively has strengths but isn't really that kind of guy. It was Maxi Kleber, the player that Jason Kidd trusts the most as the rim protector, and so he's there, but he's not really changing the shots, or Harden, he just wants to take the floater anyway. And so you don't have a player who can defend Harden. You don't have a player who can really protect the rim, so you can't really funnel. They're not really funneling things. It's not like PJ Washington was executing a strategy that was making James Harden take these shots. He was failing, and James Harden was getting these shots as a result. And so the Mavericks they used all this capital, and they played very well over the course of the final stretch. But they don't have enough guys that can actually do everything that they need the non-Kyrie Luka players to do. And it's a big problem for this team.
Yeah, before we talk about the strategy and the Mavericks deficiencies, I mean, regardless whether it was PJ Washington guarding him or not, regardless it was Luka Doncic guarding him, who was
Sure.
totally good on him in game two, perhaps before this knee issue caught up, and also before he got in foul trouble. But like, I didn't think James Harden had this type of performance still in him, and like he was able to like blow by PJ Washington and the floater, like that is something that he's had, but he's been very low to take. Like the fact that James Harden hit 6 2-point field goals, like when's the last time he had 6 2-point field goals in a game like this season? He had 6 in the fourth quarter. Like I just the psychology of it all, and just like, and also like the fact that James Harden was the guy who had the most left at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now he didn't do that much throughout the middle two quarters necessarily, but like that's going against type certainly, and that he's just like blowing by guys was an issue. I was actually very mad at the Mavericks strategy when Luka would get switched onto him of double teaming, and it looked like it was going to work initially to just not guard Russ, but then they actually got Russ on more of a roll going to the basket. He was able to set up a dunk for Plumlee, who actually had some nice moments offensively in this game with his off ball cutting before he turned back into a pumpkin defensively. But so I was like, why are they double teaming? Like, make James Harden prove he can beat you. And then they did do that, and he did beat them. And I was just really surprised that like James Harden was able to beat them from 2-point range the way he did. But full credit to him, it was really a really impressive throwback performance that you just didn't believe that he had it. And this is, I mean, he's been even a level below where he was last season when he had those two big games in game one and game four in the Celtics series that kind of extended that series.
Yeah, and hilariously, game 1 and game 4, the 2 best James Harden performances so far in
So
this series.
so
I looked it
so it
up.
is, yeah.
I looked it up. Harden has only made 6 or more had only made 6 two-pointers as a Clipper 3 times, and
Wow.
appropriately, the last time he hit 8, or the last time he hit more than 6, but it was 10, was game 4 against the Celtics last year.
Yeah, and Harden was 6 of 7 from 2 in the fourth quarter on his way to those 15 points that you mentioned. Also had the 2 assists. The next topic has to be Doncic, and
Sure.
I still have no idea what happened to him in game 3 that had him limping and go to the scorer's table and come back. But I mean, basically in all these games, he hasn't had the touch from 3-point range. He hit the big one in game 2 that iced it, but and he had one step back on Zubats in the fourth quarter when they switched him on. But other than that, he hasn't been able to make the three. I think he just hasn't looked comfortable getting to his spots. He hasn't looked comfortable beating some of the guys that he usually beats easily. And sure, Kyrie had it going quite a bit, but Luke also did not look very good defensively in this game. He's limping around. He apparently like looked too re-injured, and it's always tough to tell with Luka because he's kind of like AD in the sense that although he misses a lot fewer games than AD historically, although not this year, but you know, he'll suffer these scares and then he comes right back in and he's fine. But he has not been fine to me. And now the Mavs blew a golden opportunity in this one, both with the way they started the game, both getting a little unlucky on the Clippers making as many shots as they did. But you know, they could have gone up 3-1, maybe closed this out in 5 or certainly in 6, and then Luka could have hopefully gotten some rest before the next series starts against OKC. Now, though, it looks like this is going to be a bloodbath. Hard to imagine it doesn't go 7, and that's always a possibility that they win the next 2 and that they're actually prepared for them to be without Kawhi and really lock in. But like, if the Mavs are really a serious team, and you know, part of the problem is that Doncic just was not, you know, Doncic was the 4th best player on the floor tonight. Then like they should be up 3-1 right now. They should have like both game 1 and game 4 to come down, get down like this to a team without Kawhi is unacceptable.
It is. And Luca looking limited physically is definitely a concern, and I'm less confident in you than it sounds like you are that the Mavericks are actually going to win the series. I think that there are a lot of
Oh,
ways for
I
the
mean,
Clippers.
I'm not confident. I mean, I have Dallas in 7. That's actually, I would actually consider that probably the most likely outcome right now. But yeah, I mean, they could easily lose it. And what are some of the other things that make you think that, though?
The Clippers have a better understanding, I think, of what makes them work offensively. Other than, I mean, Kyrie was masterful for long stretches of this game. We need to talk about that. And the Mavericks, they're, I mean, these cold snaps that they have from three, like just doesn't seem like they're going away. Luke is 1 for 9. I mean, that we'll have to evaluate. But if it's there are games when PJ Washington's going to make them, there are games when he's going to miss them, and then their bench players are notoriously unreliable for that. And I mean, Dante Exum barely even played in this contest, and it's kind of hard to figure out even who on the Mavericks bench is still viable. I mean, they're giving Josh Green some minutes, but he's not a particularly great fit for this series as it is currently constructed. And so the rim protection, the kind of the questionable issues exacerbated by Gafford's back condition. So like how many players they actually trust and Luka's potentially lingering injury. Like, I mean, I don't as I said, I don't think there is as much signal in the Clippers first half, but I still think they are very competitive in this series.
Yeah, I think this is still looking like a defensive series because the Mavs have not convinced me that they're going to just blow the doors off the Clippers, and part of that is just that they don't really have the personnel to explode from 3-point range, particularly when Luka is going like this, right? Like, so the Mavs got up 33 threes, 11 and 33, but Kyrie was 6 of 12, and Kyrie's doing it all off the dribble. So is Luka, and Derek Jones Jr. Okay, like he hit a couple, but he's 2 of 3 from 3, and he makes up for a little bit with some of his drives. But, that spot used to be a guy who would get up like 6 or 7 in 33 minutes playing next to Luka. And so it's hard to be really explosive when you're not getting up that many threes. And particularly when Zubats is there for the Clippers, like they're not going to just completely dominate the interior. I know they had the 8 dunks in game 3, but they weren't like, even then it wasn't like that dominating of an offensive performance. I would say they did hit the offensive glass a lot. Like that's something more that they can work on, particularly if Lou is going to go without Zubats at the end. I thought Zubats was pretty tired. That's part of why I thought that worked out pretty well, and gave him maybe more of a defensive group on the perimeter at least. Although I would like Zubats to finish games, particularly against this Mavs team that doesn't have a lot. But the Mavs also weren't playing their center. I mean, that's one thing that we have in the comments here is that more lively. I mean, Gafford, who knows what the story is with his back, who's good in game 3. They did go with Kleba. Kleba is looking reasonably athletic, but do they have a little bit more for Harden? Does Harden have to think a little bit more if you have like a lively stepping up? Might actually like get your floater in the air as opposed to Kleba, who's like more of a position guy at this point in his career.
Yeah, I mean Gafford's are you as surprised as I am at how much Gafford's injury has messed up their rotations?
Yeah, I don't know. How do you think it's messed it up?
Well, just because now that he's been unreliable, and so that means it's more lively and more clean. But those are both capable players. But I think this series has kind of shown the shortcomings of that.
Yeah, I think so. Now, like, because Kleba just is not going to bomb it from 3 that much.
I mean, he took
I mean,
one
he's
shot
been
in
making
22
some.
minutes.
Yeah. Well, and Exum being judged unplayable, he was -8 in 2 minutes. He missed another open 3. I still think that giving up on him so quickly is foolish. I mean, after he was like, they were at their best with him in the lineup all season. And just asking Luca and Kyrie to play this many minutes it really, really seems difficult. A lot of times too, you'll see sort of a like game 4, both teams will go incredibly hard. I don't know if it'll be with these teams particularly with Kid and Kyrie and Luca, like they just want to play. But sometimes you'll see game 5 and a 2-2 series. Both coaches will kind of be like, all right, we're actually in like a 3-game series now. Maybe we will dial the minutes back a little bit, at least in the first half, to try to like acknowledge that we have 2 to 3 more games for sure, as opposed to like game 4 is the one where they always just go crazy with the minutes because like that can either be 3-1 or 2-2 and like the difference between the series being over or not. Yeah, so I don't know about the Kleba. Like I actually think Kleba would do a better job on Harden than PJ Washington. Like I don't think it would even
Agreed.
be close there. Would they but then you're really gonna be low on offense because the other problem is with Luka in this current state, like they kind of need more spacing. They need more offense. And like if Luka were feeling good, getting into the paint, able to set up these alley oops, like a better paint scorer than he's been, then all of a sudden like playing the center becomes a little bit more viable. But like he needs that extra space, like playing Gafford and PJ Washington and then also Derek Jones, like to not really have any shooting around Luka. Like I don't think in his current state he can score efficiently like that. Kyrie can, but he was also like had a bunch of wizardry. He also had 7 turnovers in this game playing in a crowd. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, Kyrie, just to get through, to talk about his game a little bit, 40 points, 14 to 25 from the field, 6 to 12 from three, had some incredible twos and some incredible threes. And remarkably, 40 points on 29 shooting possessions. The only shot that Kyrie made in the restricted area in the entire game was this incredible double clutch play that I believe gave the Mavericks the lead. Out in the
Yeah, that was the one
hang.
right before the PG3. I mean, those 2 shots in a row were insane.
Yeah,
That was like a triple clutch by Kyrie. It was
the flaming,
unbelievable.
and the one before that was incredible. It was a flaming bag three. Luka was getting nothing, held the ball until like 4 seconds were left of the shot clock. There's like, oh, Kyrie, do something, and then Kyrie just drills a three. I can't remember. Might have been PG was on him. There was just somebody right there.
PG. PG didn't do a good job being right there enough, I would say, on with 2 on the shot clock. He probably should have pressed up a little bit more, but still an amazing shot, obviously. Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
let's see if we can hit some comments, unless you have anything else.
No, it's fine.
Specific here. Adjustment for Mavs game 5. And I think we've hit on most of them. I mean, a lot of it depends on which Luka you're getting. Like if he's feeling good, I think you can go to the centers a little bit more. I still would try Exum. I mean, like 2 minutes to me is not enough time to be like, oh yeah, it's not working. Like I know he's 0 for the series, but like unless you're watching him in practice and he just is missing 10 in a row all the time, like I just don't think there's any reason to believe that he can't get going here. It probably would have been better if he could have done it at home. They were down by so much. Being -8 in 2 minutes, kid felt he didn't necessarily have the leeway to go that route. If I'm the Clippers, I'm just going to continue to sag off a little bit more than I have been. I'm going to continue to try to force James Harden to beat me one-on-one. I don't want to overreact and do a bunch of double teaming and bail the Clippers out with easy looks. Like I want James Harden and PG to have to continue to beat me one-on-one. Like those guys are not like upper level one-on-one players anymore. And all right, if after the first half they do this again, then maybe I'll consider adjusting and bringing more help. But at this point in time, I want to make them prove that they can do this again, what they did in this game.
I completely agree.
Let's see what else we got here. So any change of opinion on who wins the series? Trevor says he does not trust the Clippers in big games.
I just don't trust the Clippers. I don't trust either of these teams right now. I'm a little bit spooked by the Luka injury. But I don't know if I don't know if that spooks me enough to like pick the Clippers without Kawhi, who we have to assume is out. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean they do have the next 2 at home. Like we saw in 2021, it doesn't seem like home court matters too much when these 2 teams get together. Obviously, different players involved there, but yeah, I don't think that necessarily there's too much that I would be putting on home court. I think either team can win on each other's home court, no problem there.
Did you see how hard I went to just not say the words "I pick the Clippers" because I feel like me saying that phrase is 1000% cursed. I also don't know that that's how I feel.
B-Ball says maybe they feel less pressure when Kawhi is out since they're expected to lose.
Well,
yeah,
I think
possibly.
I think it's just that they understand what they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they are just more intentional about their own. But yeah, I think like PG and Harden, like that pressure probably has been an issue for them. Like they haven't
Mm.
operated that well as favorites at times in their careers, or like knowing that they're not supposed to do it now. I think actually, it can be a little bit liberating. I think there might
Mm.
be something to that.
From Colin, would a healthy Tim Hardaway Jr. make any difference in a positive way for the Mavericks? Maybe not. And I mean,
I thought it would in the negative,
same.
because it gives them somewhere to go after. Now with Kawhi not healthy, maybe you can get away with playing a little more. He was doubtful for this game. We'll see whether he can get out there. Uh, but yeah, not having a backup guard, like someone in the comments was saying more Josh Green. Like Josh Green is probably their worst shooter on the perimeter. I know he's like by the numbers, he's had some moments where he's okay, but he also still kind of leans way to the side on his jumper. Like I don't really trust it. He hasn't really had great playoff games shooting the ball. So I don't love that. I do think they should, and the nice thing about the Clippers though is they don't necessarily have anyone that you're going to go at too much. Like Harden's actually been able to guard Luka. Like I think I would be trying to get Harden guarding Kyrie. That would be the matchup I
Hmm.
would be seeking the most. So Kyrie, because Harden is most vulnerable to speed matchups. Luka actually, he can kind of move his feet. He's not going to get overpowered. He knows some of the tricks. Um, Clippers, I would still try to get like, your odd Zubats post up. Also, by the way, Kleba is a much better post defender than Lively or Gafford.
True.
So that doesn't really work as well when Kleba is guarding Zubats. Mavs tried putting their center on Westbrook at least a little bit. Maybe that's something else you could consider more even, because Westbrook, until he had a few moments at the end, he was just so bad from 2-point range in these two games. And I think just kind of baiting with him, fucking with his head a little bit to actually say, oh, you're going with Westbrook, you're going small. That's actually an opportunity for us to get our center in the game. And then also we can beat you up on the offensive glass. That might be something to try.
I like that.
All right, let's move now to Milwaukee and Indiana. Dame Lillard was doubtful, did not play. Giannis did not play. Supposedly, Giannis had a workout in the morning that went well, and Doc says there's a possibility he could play. Then Chris Middleton has Miles Turner land on the back of his foot. Looked like he sprained his left ankle. It was already the right ankle that had him questionable, but Middleton still put in a yeoman's effort uh, for the Bucks. But in the end, I didn't think that Indiana particularly played that well, but they sure as hell shot that well.
They did, and I I don't think we're gonna dwell on this enough to make it to go the full length here. I feel worse about the Pacers after a double digit win in this game than I do almost any team after almost any playoff game, Suns accepted. Because this Milwaukee team that was available for them on the floor, because it's also important to note that Bobby Portis got tossed after 7 minutes of action in this one. So here are the players who played more than 10 minutes of this contest for the Milwaukee Bucks. Chris Middleton, who, as we said, was dealing with injuries. Brooke Lopez, Patrick Beverley, who only played 21 minutes. Malik Beasley, Danilo Gallinari, Jay Crowder, Pat Connaughton, AJ Green, Andre Jackson Jr., who had some nice moments. The Indiana Pacers gave up a 106 half court offensive rating and a 116.7 overall to a team that played 21 minutes with a point guard, and that point guard is a below average offensive point guard. And it's Middleton had some nice moments. I mean, Brooke had some really good ones offensively too. We even got
Yeah.
some little throwback back to the basket. This win made me significantly less confident in the Pacers in the next round should they make it.
Well, the other problem too is Halliburton, despite shooting it well, 5 of 12 from three, missed a couple late, but he had a nice little jag to start the third as they built their lead. But like he was questionable coming in with lower back soreness. Only played 32 minutes. They looked like they were hoping not to have to bring him back in, and then they had to when the Bucks cut it to 6, and the Pacers were able to reestablish behind some crazy shooting from Miles Turner at 7 of 9 from three, and added to his underrated collection of poster dunks by just throwing it in over the head of Brooke Lopez. That was one of the
Yeah.
best dunks I've seen in a long time. Um,
It was
So
sort of
that,
like a weak but still awesome version of the Mozgov dunk.
yeah, I mean, I, he's 7 foot and he's got really long arms, so it's not as spectacular. But like when he can load up off of 2 feet, like it's gonna be pretty nasty. He had one against the Cavs back in 2017 in the game that they ironically blew a huge lead, 24-point lead in Game 3 against the Cavs in the official, actual most competitive sweep of all time. But so he was fantastic. He really bailed them out, and then once Milwaukee really got in trouble when they started sticking to Turner and pick and roll because he was shooting so well. And then Nemhart, who was really at the controls more in the fourth quarter, uh, getting downhill as the point guard, where he's actually been very effective the last 2 games. And he had 15 points and 9 assists in this. Halliburton only had 4 assists. He wasn't getting in the paint. He was shooting the ball. But like, especially when he came back in, because he came out early in the third with like 7 minutes left in the third. And when he came back in, he was not moving very well at all. And of course, like lower back, all connected to the hamstring. Like it's something to keep an eye on. Hopefully they can kind of get it right. Like that's one of those things where you can get treatment and maybe he'll just be feeling better in the next game. So that's a concern. Like he had a few moments early where you're like, oh, this is the Pacers now that he's hitting some of these threes, like penetrating and then backing up to the 3-point line. But overall, like still not quite there. Uh, I mean, yeah, Turner was the guy. I mean, that was the biggest thing that for him to go 7 of 9 from downtown, 29 points, 3 blocks, uh, and so that he bailed out the Pacers. I thought when their defense and their defensive approach wasn't very good. As is often the case, and you could probably point to some examples of this too, where when the opponent is shorthanded, they kind of like didn't know the scouting report on some of these guys, it seemed like, and that led to a lot of defensive breakdowns that just shouldn't have happened.
There were definitely some of those, and then there were others where and this came up at times during the Celtics Heat series, where when a team is shorthanded, don't overreact as much and give up easy shots when you don't need to. And there were circumstances where the Pacers were treating like a guy getting into the lane, and I mean Middleton had his moments in this one, but they treated a guy getting into the lane as like a 5 alarm fire. Whereas if you just played everyone straight one-on-one and never helped, the Bucks would not be able to score with any consistency.
Well, I think Lopez would be the exception of that.
Yeah, sure. I mean more
Um,
like Beasley and Beverly and Andre Jackson, though he did hit 2 of his 4 threes in this
yeah.
one. Like you, the more you make life easier on their support players and you make those passes easier, it may actually makes your life harder as a defense.
Yeah. Now, I do think that they should have considered doubling Brook Lopez, and they should do that in the next game if he gets going, because he's not really known for his passing. And also, I mean, the Bucks are playing some of these lineups. Like their lineup to start the fourth quarter was Jay Crowder, who, man, is he done. And then Andre Jackson, who was 2 of 4 from three in this game, but I'm still gonna, particularly if he's not in the corner, I am very interested in forcing him to shoot an above the break three. And again, it's not just like a total dare shot, but it's just okay, you throw it to him, and now we'll try to close out the way we normally would, but we're not gonna like fly past you. We'll close out short, force you to shoot it. We'll try to get a contest. It's not just like turn your back to the fucking guy and let him shoot it in the playoffs, but you just like that is what you are willing to give up on those double teams. You might even force a turnover as well. I also would have
Is
considered in
that
this
allowed,
game.
Nate?
Yeah.
Both teams under
Yeah.
10 turnovers under 10 turnovers in this game, and only I think it was 5 steals each.
I would consider also a little bit of Siakam on Middleton just to change it up. Like they're matching up Neesmith with Middleton. I think he's been like okay. I don't think he's been so good on Middleton. Like Middleton's been able to get to his spots, draw a couple of fouls. Though Neesmith's getting a little better at that. So but I think, but particularly because there are going to be moments when they don't have Portis at the four. Like I think the idea was, all right, well, we need Siakam to guard Portis in the post. If they're going with Andre Jackson at the four or Crowder or Connaughton, then you could just throw Neesmith, have him be off the ball, give Siakam some reps on Middleton just to kind of change it up, keep it fresh. I don't think that Middleton can just like kind of get to a spot against Siakam. That also even gives you the possibility of possibly switching that pick and roll if you wanted to. I would even like let Turner get a couple of reps on Middleton, who still looks pretty good, honestly, driving the ball. I thought these have been very impressive games by him trying to leave it all out there with his own health status. Let's see here. What else we got from this one?
Somehow the Indiana Pacers had a 50 offensive rating in transition.
Yeah, particularly with how well they shot it from three. That's
and no turnovers. I mean, very exceedingly few.
Two small things. This was true also in one of the earlier games. Like the transition take foul, there were two that should have been called, in my opinion, in this game. One was at the end of the half where they inbounded. It was after a make, but they're trying to push it up and they give the foul to give in the backcourt. But like that's a transition opportunity. It doesn't matter whether it's after a make or not. Like the definition is transition opportunity. Like he's trying to push it up and they just give the foul. And then the other one was the play where they wrapped up Neesmith from behind. They let that be a loose ball foul. Like he clearly had it control of it dribbling the ball. I don't know how that wasn't a transition take foul either. Let's see, what else did I have here?
I mean, so considering Nembhard's strong play in this game and then against the Warriors in that game last year, is it maybe that he's a really good point guard against older, slower teams? That's where it works.
But I mean, if he gets into the paint, he's going to make a pretty good decision. And against this Bucks perimeter defense, and also with Miles Turner spreading the floor, he can get into the paint. And I think I would be giving him as many reps as I could. Let him continue to explore this a little bit. And
I want to look up the last time TJ McConnell took 3-3-pointers in a game.
I think it happened earlier in the series. I think
it might have
game one.
And I was just like, yeah. I mean, he's trying to keep him honest, I guess.
The Middleton Lopez pick and pop on the left side. They would just run a side pick and roll. Middleton would get towards the lane and then turn it back to Lopez way out from 4-point range on the left wing. They finally shut off the water on that by bringing a third guy over to the nail to take Middleton so that Turner could stay attached a little bit more. And when the Bucks have like an Andre Jackson on the weak side, you're able to do that. Again, the Pacers just need to lock in a little bit more on like what some of these Bucks players can and can't do for game 5. And this is another one where the Knicks are probably going to win. Like if you're the Pacers and you want to get Halliburton some rest, you don't want to continue into a long series. You certainly don't want to let them win game 5 and then Giannis maybe comes back in game 6. Like they need to fucking win game 5. Like they need to take that very seriously.
Yeah, because if it goes to 6, I mean, we don't know Lillard's availability moving forward, anything else. Like it could spiral, and like we don't know player availability stuff, but the longer this series goes, the more potential fraught with danger it is for the Pacers.
For the Bucks, I wouldn't give up on their zone. The Pacers were just so hot that they shot him out of it, but I still thought the process was pretty decent for the Bucks because it's not like they're stopping them anyway. You get your guys a little bit more rest as well. Keep Lopez closer to the rim. I thought Lopez actually had some better moments as a rim protector in this one. Yeah, the Pacers, when the Bucks did make a comeback in the third, they weren't very organized, but I'm not sure. I was like, hey, maybe they could run a pick and roll with Tyrese Halliburton, but then he subs out right after that with the back issue, so maybe he's just not capable of doing that. And yeah, I mean, Crowder, Connaughton has been pointed out in the comments that he's been miserable as well. Like those guys are just not reliably making shots. I mean, Pat Connaughton is like running some pick and roll in this game. I would even consider bringing Beverly off the bench now and just going with Andre Jackson at point guard. Because I think you need to force some turnovers, get out in transition. Playing Beverly a ton of minutes is pretty rough. Like Jackson at least can like get some offensive rebounds or something. So, and I think he's, especially if you're going to play some zone, Jackson like gives you at the top of that zone, can make some plays. Ready to talk Lakers and Denver, unless we got any comments here.
If Giannis is back the rest of the series, can they come back? Yes, but caution that if Giannis were to come back in game 5, he would not be 100% Giannis. We can't even think to presume that. But yes, conceptually. Um,
Well, and at least he would also give them something on defense too. But yeah, I mean, it's hard for with the calf. It's hard to imagine he'll be in like peak shape. You know, he's part of what makes him so dangerous is like all the running and transition. And they do have Siakam to guard him. Remember, like they haven't played in this iteration of the Pacers against Giannis yet this year. Yeah, let's talk Denver and the Lakers now. And the biggest thing that stood out to me, it was a game 4, so we elected to spend last night with our families, watch it this morning. The Lakers just actually played a lot harder than Denver,
mhm.
you know, probably, and were able to sustain that even into the fourth quarter. The guy who stood out to me as making the biggest difference was D'Angelo Russell. Like he was actually getting involved on the boards, like tipping away offensive rebounds. He like blew up a DHO by reaching in and forcing a turnover. There was one time when somebody tried to bully him and he like pushed him back a little bit. He was trying to like dribble through him for a layup. So I thought that he actually, after how poorly he played, not just being a complete liability in every area, really helped. And of course, making some shots is good too, but it's not like the Lakers shot the lights out here. And then the other thing you can point to is just the Lakers like completely destroyed Denver in the paint in a way that was not great. If you're the Denver Nuggets, it kind of reminded me a little bit of how it looked in Game 4 of the Sun series last year, in one specific way. But in particular, like this is like a couple of moments now in this series, and the Lakers do have enough offensive players that they should be able to score well. They're a top 5 offense for the second half of the year, I believe. Uh, but they have made Denver look pretty bad defensively, I thought, in this game.
The Lakers took 36 shots in the restricted area and made 27 of them, and that does
Yeah.
not even include the fouls that they drew. They were 16 of 18 from the line. Second chance points was 14-5 in favor of the Lakers. And part of what I thought was the story of this, because watched it after the fact, as you mentioned, was it was funny knowing the result, because I'm sure there were moments if I had been watching it live that it would have been like, oh, they're starting to lose the rope. There was the sequence where Michael Porter Jr. had two dunks in pretty close succession, the second of which came from a preposterous touch pass from Jokic, where he basically just batted the ball forward that he may not have even really seen before he hit it,
Oh, that
and
was
gets it.
unbelievable.
One of the most crazy passes I've ever seen. And so I think the second Porter Jr. dunk put it down to 8. You're like, doing that. But the Lakers, they kept pushing. Their offense actually had some flow. And you brought up you brought up their energy. I actually saw that also, that they were more active in terms of their off-ball movement, and they were actually like doing things offensively. Sometimes there was a guy who was cutting or someone was flashing around the basket, and it looked a lot better for them in the fourth quarter of Game 4 than it did in 1, 2, and 3, because they played with more energy and more force.
And they also like ran actual basketball plays as well. They didn't just like stand there and hold the ball until there was 8 on the shot clock and try to ISO. And some of the stuff that really was working well was pick and rolls with 2 guys above the arc in addition to the ball handling. They had a number of ways they got into it. So your normal like drag screen type of stuff. And the other thing that they would do is really try to make the screeners be the 2 biggest, whoever the 2 biggest guys for the Nuggets were guarding a lot of the time, and to try to make Murray be the low man. They had some success there, but the Suns had a lot of success in these kind of double screening actions because they would get Jokic out on the floor. Really, if you can get 3 Nuggets above the arc, like they're very good at maintaining their defensive shell and rotating. But if you can get 3 guys out there and then move the ball, or you get this great target in AD rolling to the basket, you can get him the ball on the slip. They have guys like Reeves and Russell and LeBron, all of whom are good enough passers to find AD on that roll. And then the low man has to step up. And particularly when they went to LeBron standing in the corner, then when AD would get it, it was either going to be a dunk or they could get Russell coming downhill, and then LeBron would cut right behind the defense for dunks as well in the fourth. So the Nuggets are going to have to kind of figure out what they're going to do with that. Generally, what they went to, if memory serves, last year against the Suns was just basically trying to kind of keep those actions on the side, not let them get side to side, string out Jokic, and then get in behind to just try to, if you can keep it all on the side, then you're just limiting some of the damage that can take place. The other thing they're doing is a lot of these, it's still kind of similar concept, but I've been talking about this since game one. It's worked well just about every time they tried it. Is little zoom actions like get the ball to AD at the elbow, then whoever threw it to AD will go and screen for usually LeBron on the wing. LeBron will come off that screen, then go get the handoff, turn the corner. The only way you can deal with that is you have to have Jokic get on the floor. And again, that's going to release Davis going to the basket. So they got to figure out a way to deal with that. I would try to maybe pressure the passer a little bit more, or sorry, pressure AD a little bit more to not let him catch it. But that's Jokic. Like, is he really going to be, 25 feet on the floor denying? Uh, maybe you try to deny LeBron out on the wing to let him to kind of force him to go backdoor in that circumstance as well, like not let him come off of those two screens and turn the corner going downhill. But that's a tough action to guard. The Nuggets have gotten a lot out of those sort of zoom actions themselves for Murray. And that maybe would be my next point, Danny, is just Jamal Murray, other than a minute of brilliance at the end of game two, has been a relative non-factor in this series.
Yeah, some of the stats on that was something I wanted to talk about. Jamal Murray overall for the series, 44% true shooting on 30 usage. That's not fantastic. And the Lakers do not have unbelievable personnel to slow him down. I mean, we're Gabe Vincent played 17 minutes of this one. It was mostly Russell and Reeves, and they have good help around the rim, of course, but they don't have that. And another wild stat: Murray 0 for 4 in Game 4 from three. Overall in the series, he is 5 of 24 from three. And then this is another jaw dropper: the Denver Nuggets were 9 of 30 from long range in Game 4. That 30% improved their overall 3-point percentage in the series
Yeah.
up to 27.6.
And the Lakers, they actually outshot, actually, they were both basically right at 30% this game, 9 of 30. Lakers were 8 of 26. But the Lakers did hit just enough,
Mm-hmm.
particularly from the corners, because the thing that the Nuggets were trying to deal with some of this pick and roll game was they were going to really try to pinch the floor. Some of the same stuff that they did those many years ago against the Jazz when they had the 3-1 comeback against them, and Donovan Mitchell was killing them in pick and roll. And so, like, the one that really sticks out to me is Reggie Jackson's guarding Gabe Vincent in the corner. He's basically standing at the left elbow, and Gabe Vincent, or I guess it would be the right elbow, facing the offense, and Gabe Vincent's in the right corner. So they just threw the ball at Gabe Vincent, and he just hit a corner three. Like, they got enough. Hachimura hit a corner three. So did Russell, and then LeBron being in that corner, he was able, as we talked about, to slip behind the defense, which was pretty impressive. The other thing, Michael Porter Jr., another bad defensive game. I think they need to continue to pick at him more. D'Lo actually beat him 3 times in isolation,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the matchup. Then they tried to switch KCP onto D'Lo, and they slammed him with the screen pretty good. And D'Lo hit the 3 off the pick and roll. He was 4 of 8 from downtown, but Reeves was getting going in the first half, so they were kind of like, particularly when they go with a 3-guard alignment, there isn't necessarily a place to hide Porter Jr. And so getting him onto one of the guards, like, they're going to switch those actions to put him in there. Like, I would absolutely try to get that involved. See if you could get him onto LeBron at times too. I think would be good, but particularly like D'Lo actually kind of cooked him. Like, I would go back to that matchup if I'm the LA Lakers.
It worked out pretty well. And a note from Truitt that I think is important to mention with Jamal Murray is that we got the reporting on Sunday. The game was, of course, on Saturday, that Jamal Murray is questionable for Game 5 with what is being described as a left calf strain.
Yeah, this is concerning. The Nuggets definitely need to be healthy with that starting 5, and they were last year. And so there's this feeling that they're completely unassailable. And when everyone's playing healthy and playing well, I think that's probably right. Although their bench is looking pretty miserable, and the Lakers again did a really good job of forcing those guys to shoot some threes. They even double team Murray to get the ball out of his hands with those bench units. So yeah, we'll see whether he plays. Like, a calf strain is not. That's not one of those things where it's okay, sore knee, sore ankle, you play through it. You can easily injure it, make it worse. So this will be, if he's not 100%, that's going to be an interesting decision for Denver to make of whether they want to try to get him a bunch of rest close this out because they got another monster series coming against Minnesota, who's like locked in a dogfight with the Phoenix team trying to save Frank Vogel's job right now.
Yeah, I'm sure they're struggling for that unifying purpose.
Let's see here. What else? I think the Lakers just like their defense has been good, particularly in the first halves. Like the Nuggets, they need to come out more urgent in the first half. And I think we're gonna see Jokic in particular, who I thought didn't play very well in this one. Like he got to the foul line some. He had 33 and 14 with also 14 rebounds, but didn't seem throughout most of the game to be controlling that much of the action. I think he's going to come out really aggressively to try to get them off to a good start at home in game 5. And if I'm the Lakers, I'm going to continue to force the Nuggets to beat me from the outside. And particularly if it's anyone who's not Michael Porter Jr., and particularly on the bench units. But the Lakers have done a good job. Like, there was one like sweep behind the back pass that Jokic had that was only amazingly somehow only his second best pass of the game to Porter Jr. for a dunk in the first quarter. But other than that, like the number of system buckets that the Nuggets got is pretty low. Like remember last year's series, like Aaron Gordon was ducking in. Like that's something I think they need to explore a lot more is like trying to really whoever like D'Lo or Reeves is guarding needs to like start setting some monster screens for Gordon and like let Jokic try to dime Gordon up closer to the rim. Like they need to get more of those actions because they've really been relatively non-existent so far. Those system buckets, and so like the Lakers have defended reasonably well throughout a lot of these games. But again, they're up 3-1 for a reason. Like I expect them to be fine, but it's worth noting.
Yes. And
Jackson Hayes played. Yeah, sorry.
No.
That's surely where you were going, right?
It really wasn't. It really wasn't. The Jackson Hayes played 6 minutes. Christian Wood, I believe, was available but did not participate in the action. We'll see if he potentially gets involved in a game 5. And yeah, I thought the Nuggets were flat overall, and I think part of it might be that they've been able to have some slow starts and still be able to close them out. And I sincerely hope that this is not the case, but we've talked about it so much over the years of not closing out a team when you have an opportunity. There are all these downside risks and the fatigue.
Like Murray is injured right now, right? Like that's the biggest thing that sticks out.
Yeah, I mean, but that was in a game 4, which you still had to actually play the game. But like a game 5, a game 6, much less the play-in games that these guys got hurt in, and so it's the cumulative fatigue. I think that was a big part of Boston falling apart in the 22 finals as well, is that they had all those series that went on longer than they should have and everything else. And so we'll see where it goes. I'm hopeful that the Nuggets, like every other team, can be happy and healthy and be fully staffed going into the second, third, and fourth rounds should they make it that far. But it doesn't take much with how good, like we're going to be entering the great game now, especially in the Western Conference very, very soon. And the idea that it's the healthiest team in the mix, you have to be healthy in that phrase to be able to make it work.
Couple other notes here. Anthony Davis has struggled in some of these fourth quarters. And like I think he only even got 5 touches in all of game 3's fourth quarter. But like he's played well enough to win. Like he's run out of gas, but he's been very efficient in every game. I mean, he was 11 to 17 in this one, 25 points, 23 rebounds, 20 defensive rebounds. I thought this was easily his best defensive rebounding game. Also had 6 assists working out of those short roll plays. That was big. I mean, LeBron, it didn't seem again like he was like the guy running pick and roll and isolating and everything, but still managed 30 points on 14 to 23. Just got a lot of stuff right at the basket that the Nuggets they're going to have to find a way to clean up even better than they have, because
and a couple of huge pick sixes as well that really got the crowd going in the first, and then late in the fourth that basically sealed it.
Taurean Prince, the first time he throws a one more pass when he gets the ball in the perimeter against a closeout, it'll be the first. It's always just shoot or drive. He'll never make the next pass to just like the guy who's wide open in the corner when he catches it on the wing. He's always going to try to drive, and then he certainly isn't going to make a pass once he puts it on the floor either. So yeah, they've been getting by with him at times in this series, but I've not been particularly impressed with his decision making. Yeah, all right, that'll do it here on that. And yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see tomorrow. If Phoenix wins, we'll probably talk some about that game and Frank Vogel keeping his job. Woj reported that it could be in jeopardy if they lose, which I don't know that it's his fault, but it's also what else can they change at this point? And
Yeah, unfortunately, Frank Vogel does not have a no trade clause.
Mark Daigneault is coach of the year, well deserved, I would say.
Absolutely.
He would have been my selection. I believe he was yours as well, if memory serves.
100%.
And let's see, is there any other like injury stuff we got to hit on?
We got the line from Baxter Holmes that Vogel said he has the full support of Matt Ishbia. You don't want full support. Doesn't that seem like that
Yeah,
phrasing always comes out right before a guy gets fired?
Because if he's supporting you, he could just flop anytime, and that support's gonna just fall away. Oh, I did want to mention one other thing too. LeBron got really mad at J.R. Smith for not challenging that out of bounds call.
You mean uh,
Yeah, that he threw a few like kind of crazy tantrums that if the game had been close would have gotten a lot more scrutiny, where he just was like crying to the refs or his own bench or something, and like they just gave up a layup because he was complaining that they didn't challenge it out of bounds. Say, okay, maybe they should have, but it's just like how about you play basketball instead of just like looking at your own bench as someone lays it in for the other team. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to y'all then. Oh, how foolish of me. We haven't selected anyone who is going to get a free year of Dunked on Prime. Do you have anyone in mind?
let me look.
We could take a couple more questions too, actually.
Oh, I actually kind
Yeah.
of want to watch the fourth of Timberwolves Suns.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case,
Let's
well, you can just go and I'll answer a couple questions.
that sounds very nice.
Okay. Well, you want to pick someone first, though?
Yes.
I will answer this question quickly from who is this here?
Oh, I liked Trevor Who's point about Deuce replacing quickly. That was something that led to a good conversation. So Trevor gets it.
All right, Trevor, email dunkedonprime@gmail.com and redeem your free year of Dunked on Prime. That's awesome. And I'll take a couple more questions if you feel free to sign off, Danny. Ben says, I personally think that MPJ has been the second best offensive player of the Nuggets in the series. Been excellent shooting, be able to get some of his spots when they need him to. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's right. Like the latent value of Murray, though, like they don't really have anyone else who can initiate anything off the dribble, though. So if you just took him off the team, you would kind of be in a worse situation. But in terms of like who has performed his role the best, yeah, he's clearly done a better job than Murray has. And I think like they have had more success actually running plays for him than they have in the past, which I think is important. How would I handicap each series from here on out? And you got to say Knicks in 5 at this point. Although I think Philly winning Game 5 and then losing Game 6 at home in front of a bunch of delirious Knicks fans would be quite apropos. I'm going to stick with Dallas in 7, my original pick in that series. Thunder are going to sweep. I would guess the Pels don't seem like the most resilient team in the world. Not gonna touch it. It's probably Wolves in 4 or 5. I'm not gonna touch that one since that's ongoing right now. Let's see, what else am I forgetting? I'm gonna actually say Pacers in 6. I'm sticking with Cavs in 7 right now, just because they have the home court, and that's it. What else am I forgetting here? Maybe I should just like call up the bracket if I'm gonna do this. Boston in 5. All right, I think that's everyone. All right, and the one last person I want to, who's actually been a great supporter for a while, is Stop It Sims. Come on down and get your free year of Dunked on Prime. Dunkedonprime@gmail.com. is the email, and Dan will take care of you. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And for those of you listening on the public pod, we'll talk about Saturday's games here in a moment.